Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
And good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 28th of January. As always, we encourage you to visit our website for the very latest weather information. Weather.gov/Alaska will take you there now as well. Weather info line at 800-472-0391. And many of you have already found us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Thanks for doing that and sharing those links with your friends to spread the message. Hazardous weather tonight includes a dense fog advisory until at least noon tomorrow for parts of the upper Tanana Valley there, including areas around Eagle and Northway. Some very dense fog and poor visibility there, and a flood watch remains in effect for the Keystone Canyon area. As you well know, if you are below in Valdez, you're watching that very carefully, and we continue to do the same. Thank you for your information on that, and again, pictures and information are very much appreciated on Facebook and on Twitter anytime. One thing to pass on today, a very interesting occurrence yesterday. Alaska ties the all-time January record high, Port Ellsworth. It reached a high temperature of 62 yesterday, tying Petersburg and Craig for the highest temperature ever recorded during the month of January in Alaska. The picture you see behind there was taken from the National Park Service near Port Ellsworth by D. Young, courtesy of the Lake Clark National Park and Preserve. A beautiful place. Hope to see it myself someday. And again, you can see that it looked like a beautiful day there in that picture. Here's a look out at the Bering Sea and several areas of low pressure swirling out here in the western Bering and just south of the Kamchatka Peninsula. Pretty good draw from the subtropical moisture feeding up into the southern Bering Sea as we go. But a lot of this is really going to remain unfocused as it progresses eastward. In fact, the frontal boundary here will likely fall apart in the next 24 to 48 hours. And you can see very dry weather is now taking shape across the Gulf of Alaska and into the interior. So much so that visibility for flying purposes should be greatly improved. Of course, one exception there across the upper Tanana Valley, as we just mentioned. And if you look out to the west, you'll notice colder air feeding in behind the latest frontal boundary to sweep across the western Aleutians. That speckled or mackerel kind of sky there looks like in the satellite picture, indicating that colder cloud cover. Meanwhile, warm air being sent far to the north. Temperatures across the Arctic coast struggled to stay below zero today. In fact, just one place along the Arctic coast, southwest of Dead Horse, managed to see a negative temperature reading this afternoon. Pretty impressive warmth. And it continues, but it is starting to back off. With high pressure just west of Haida Gwaii, we've seen just a few pockets of light rain today across parts of southeast. Mostly it has been some light rainfall working in across Prince William Sound. Most of the precipitation around Valdez today, as we understand, has been relatively light. You can see a warm front lifting north of the Seward Peninsula. Our next weather maker trying to work in from the west. Ahead of that, rain showers are likely for parts of the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure sitting across the Copper River Basin and parts of south central will keep precipitation at a minimum. The best chance for any rainfall, mainly in south central, will mostly be along the mountains there. Meanwhile, in the Kotzebue Sound region, areas of rain and snow and maybe some light freezing rain will remain possible. For southeast, mostly mountain rainfall will be possible there. Some areas of higher terrain, of course, looking at some snow, but still pretty mild weather exists all across the Gulf of Alaska. As you look out toward the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, scattered light rainfall is possible there with a frontal boundary now mainly east of the St. Matthew Island waters, east of the Pribilofs, and then stretching across the eastern Aleutians. But watch what happens as we go ahead into Thursday. That frontal boundary falls apart. A focus for circulation now exists in the south and western Gulf. We have a very dry boundary here across southeast. Still looks like a mainly sunny, partly sunny kind of day for most of southeast. A lot of sunshine breaking through across the interior, south central, and the Copper River Basin, even Prince William Sound. And out across the west, the new focus there will be across the Gulf of Anadyr and the central and western Aleutians, where there might be some patches of light snow and perhaps rain mixed with snow out into the central parts of the chain. Here's a look at temperatures today. A little bit cooler in southeast, and we were talking about this time last week, 30s and 40s now for places like Juneau, Haines, and Skagway, 45 around Ketchikan and Annette, 36 in Hyder. For South Central, 30s and 40s for Prince William Sound. It was still fairly mild in Anchorage today after starting out with some light rain. Homer and Seward both in the lower 40s. Same goes for Kodiak Island. 45 and pretty toasty in Healy. Again, having some snow issues there around the Denali National Park, obviously. 19 in Fairbanks, with areas around 24 in Fort Greely. 0 up in Fort Yukon, looking still farther north into the Brooks Range. It got even milder around Anaktuvuk Pass today with temps there in the lower 20s. Like I said, very few places across the Arctic coast were sub-zero today, which is just amazing, at least as far as I'm concerned. 4 degrees above zero in Barrow, 10 in Kaktovik, 20s and 30s around the northwestern coast there. Looked like earlier today Cape Lisburne might have been one of the warmest places in the entire state at 49 degrees, if you can believe that. Kotzebue Sound, temperatures at or just below freezing in a few places. Shishmaref 30, 34 in Nome, about the same there around Unalakleet. McGrath was showing 34 degrees. Areas around Galena, upper 20s for you. Bethel 43. St. Lawrence Island looking at 37 this afternoon. The Pribilofs all the way out to Bristol Bay in the 30s and 40s. Cape Newenham 40 degrees there. Lower 40s around the Pribilofs with some dense fog earlier this afternoon. And 30s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint about 43. Adak 34, Atka 36 degrees. Overnight low temperatures then remain pretty mild for south and west. Look for 20s and 30s there. 39 in Kodiak. 20s mostly for south central, including the Matsu Valley. 7 degrees in Fairbanks, 12 below though in Fort Yukon. And with that clear sky, that means temperatures will start to go down pretty quickly again. 4 above in Barrow overnight, so not much change for you. In 30s and 40s for southeast, with the chain looking at 20s and 30s. St. Paul looking at 35 for a high temperature tomorrow. Bethel about 37. Fairbanks, you're looking at 16. Fort Yukon about 1. Arctic Village closer to 3 with Nome at 37 degrees. The Arctic coast should see temperatures back in the low to mid-teens, so continued mild weather for you. South Central, look at temps mainly above freezing, but you'll notice that trend is going down a little bit. We'll still be above average for a while, but probably not as warm as it's been. 43 in Kodiak and low to mid-40s there for a large part of southeast. Flying weather should be at a premium tomorrow for the interior and a large part of the Alaska Range and the Arctic coast. The places that'll have a little more trouble around St. Lawrence Island, west of the Seward Peninsula, southwestern coast looking at MVFR conditions, and for the central and western chain, look for MVFR to IFR conditions with some pockets of MVFR across parts of southeast. Flying weather now. Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass should both be at VFR conditions. Lake Clark and Mill Pass, maybe a little bit of trouble at times, but marginal conditions probably at worst. Trending toward VFR conditions in Rainy Pass, and Windy Pass looks to be visual. Same goes for Isabel Pass, and good flying weather in Mentasta Pass, likely leaning over to VFR conditions there. Tanita Pass expected to be VFR. Porter's Pass seeing some improvements during the day, and Chilkoot and White Pass probably MVFR. Freezing levels shows that intense warming over the Arctic coast, but colder weather is trying to settle in across south central and southeast. You can see that surface freezing line holding up around the Pribilof Islands, but really taking a jog northward across a large part of the Bering Sea, and that elevated warming there across the Alaska Peninsula is staying intact for the moment. If you look at icing potential, most of what we'll see will be light to isolated moderate across the south and west coast, and some pockets closer to Hyder and perhaps Ketchikan and Annette, below 14,000 feet and above 6,000 feet, and another wave developing out across the western parts of the chain. High pressure is still intact across the north and eastern parts of Alaska. That's sending that southerly flow all the way across the interior and the Arctic coast. But you'll notice that pronounced trough is still with us as well, guiding in another wave of low pressure across the western Bering Sea. But for now, it doesn't have a whole lot of support to actually reach the west coast of Alaska. 9,000 feet, our ridge is intact here across the upper Yukon Valley. Southerly flow continues across southwest and the west coast of Alaska. Looking for wind speeds there between 40 and 50 knots. More of a north and westerly flow guiding some of that colder weather down through southeast, keeping things pretty dry here and keeping the focus for wetter weather out across the central and western Aleutians. At 3,000 feet, you'll notice that next wave building in a little bit farther eastward. Faster wind speeds there approaching Adak with 50 to 80 knot winds. Southerly flow remains pretty light across Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula, and Kodiak Island. And you'll experience winds around 30 to 45 knots crossing over Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound region, with a ridge of high pressure guiding very light winds in from the south and curving those back into the Yukon with high pressure across the central and eastern parts of the Gulf. And then looking at turbulence, the focus for rough flying weather will likely be across the western half of the state in the interior, all the way out toward the Seward Peninsula and the YK Delta. You might even find some isolated to occasional severe, perhaps below 6,000 feet for most areas there. More likely to run into occasional moderate from the Seward Peninsula and Kotzebue Sound southward to even Bristol Bay. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with marine weather here in just a few minutes.
ISMA, the International Snowmobile Manufacturers Association, whose members are Artco, Bombardier, Polaris, and Yamaha, is proud to present Safe Riders. You make snowmobiling safe. Snowmobiling is one of winter's most enjoyable and popular pastimes. The development of superior engineered snowmobiles, the building of a diverse network of trails, and the dedication of club volunteers have all contributed significantly to the expansion of this great sport. As responsible manufacturers, the partners in ISMA have developed the following presentation to assist riders with an orientation of what they might encounter while snowmobiling, how to deal with situations that occur, how to get home safely. The video is also intended for the seasoned sledder. As an experienced rider, you're often looked to for instruction from the novice. Safe Riders can help you help them. From handling tips to recognized hand signals, Safe Riders can only add to your wealth of knowledge and confidence when called upon to assist a new snowmobiler. After all, when it comes to Safe Riders, you make snowmobiling safe. Snowmobiling is like everything else you do. The more you know, the better prepared you are, the better you will perform. For a new rider, the first thing you should do is carefully read and understand all materials provided with your snowmobile. Then take a snowmobile safety course. Please understand, this video is not intended to replace a safety course, but may be used as part of an educational program. A course provides detailed information in classroom and field settings where you can interact and ask questions and get a first-hand demonstration and feel for the curriculum. It is highly recommended for all riders. Your local club or association has information on safety courses. As much as snowmobiling is great fun, if you aren't prepared for the winter elements, it can be very frustrating. Before you even think about your sled, make certain you are personally ready to handle your ride. This should start with your clothing. A good warm suit is a must, preferably one that is windproof. If you're riding at night, you should have reflective materials. Under your suit, always wear layers of clothing. This will allow you to adjust for any temperature changes. Your choice of gloves and boots is an important one. Fingers and toes are always the most susceptible to frostbite. Keeping them warm and dry is critical. Water-resistant boots and quality high thermal rated mitts or gloves are a must for all snowmobilers. There are two types of helmets to choose from, an open face and a full face. The full face offers better protection from the elements when driving. Regardless of which you choose, a helmet must fit snug. To test the fit, have someone try to turn your helmet while it's on your head. If it moves freely or feels loose, it isn't the right fit. Only helmets with DOT or Snell label have been tested and approved. A helmet won't work if it falls off, so always fasten and tighten the chin strap. It only takes a second. A face shield provides protection from the wind, snow, and debris, but fogging can be a problem. You may want to consider a double lens shield or an electric one that works similar to a car's rear window defroster. A face mask can also prevent fogging by working to deflect your warm breath away from your shield. Goggles can also be worn with an open face helmet. Okay, you've taken care of your physical readiness. What about your mindset? Do you know what you need to know? It's always wise to check the weather forecast for temperature and possible storms. Get a map. You should know your route. Is there any open water or thin ice? Have you checked with the locals for conditions? Did you take note of where you can get fuel, food, and shelter? And for any long-distance riding, always leave a copy of your route with a friend or relative and check in regularly. To be legal and avoid problems, make certain you have the proper insurance, registration, permits, and licenses to ride. States and provinces often differ in their requirements. Information is available from government agencies and clubs. To sum up, your mental preparation is quite simple. Know before you go. Thinking ahead can assist with unforeseen circumstances. Carrying a drive belt and spare spark plugs, a toolkit, flashlight, and a tow rope can help with the mechanical needs. A first aid kit, fire starting materials, a compass, a whistle, and high-energy food and water can prove necessary in surviving a serious situation. Many people carry their cellular phones. Bring yours if you have one. Thinking ahead can help you avoid many problems. It's common sense, a big part of being a safe rider. Snowmobiles are great machines, but it's important to remember they are motor vehicles. They're powerful and unique in their operation. So it's very important to get familiar with how they operate and what you need to know to ensure they keep performing. This begins even before you start the machine, with the materials provided by the manufacturer, such as the owner's manual or operator's guide. Carefully read and understand the materials. They're written by the manufacturer who built the snowmobile. It does contain the basic things you need to know to improve your enjoyment in operating a snowmobile. The pre-operation check is something a safe rider does before every ride. Under the hood, make certain your drive belt is in good condition. You're carrying a spare belt as well as spare spark plugs. Then check the fluids and fill them if necessary. Don't forget to secure the hood latches. Check the lights and windshield for cracks and dirt. The idea is see and be seen. Always test the throttle and brake controls for proper tension and operation. Just give them a couple of squeezes. They should return to the same position without sticking. The track should be checked for ice buildup, alignment, and possible tears. We give the handlebars a turn to examine the steering and alignment of the skis. Check the skis for wear. Remember, these checks and any necessary repairs must be done prior to starting the sled. For a quick reference, review the information decals on your snowmobile. Once you're confident that both you and the snowmobile are ready to go, it's time to start up. Your owner's manual or operator's guide will direct you on the type of snowmobile you have and the proper method of starting it. Once started, a safe rider's mindset is respect. Respect for the power of the snowmobile, respect for your limitations, and respect for the environment. Start off by testing the throttle for the power of the acceleration. Hold on and squeeze slowly. Then do the same for the brake. Listen to the engine. If something doesn't sound right, have it checked. It's too late when you're out on your snowmobile. Before you leave, make sure all your systems are functioning, including both headlight beams, the tail light, the brake light, and the emergency shut-off switch. It's also a good idea to check your ski runners to make sure your sled will respond to the steering. You've checked your sled and prepared yourself, and there's only one thing left to do. Get comfortable and ride safely. As a snowmobiler, there are a few things that are deemed the rules of riding. They're mostly common sense, but experience tells us they often get overlooked. Many rules are similar to driving a car. The first being, don't drink and drive. Alcohol has been proven to distort your depth perception, impair your reaction time and coordination, and impair your natural sense of caution. Operation under the influence has unfortunately been proven to lead to fatalities all too often. For the safety of everyone, zero tolerance, alcohol-free is the only right way to ride. Statistics clearly show that alcohol is a contributing factor in many of the accidents and fatalities of both new and experienced riders, as well as innocent victims. When stopping at a rest area or for the night, remember not to leave your keys in an unattended snowmobile. It presents an invitation to thieves and unknowledgeable riders of all ages. Racing should be left to the racetracks, radar runs, and organized race events. Public snowmobile trails require responsible riding. The faster you go, the less time you have to react to a situation, and the more braking time is required to stop, especially considering you're riding on ice and snow. When riding, always stay to the right of the trail and leave room for oncoming traffic on the left. Be sure to keep sufficient distance between you and the sled in front. You never know when a circumstance will arise that requires you to slow down or stop. Fallen trees, wildlife, or a groomer may be just around the bend, so stay alert, look ahead, watch for signs, and keep your distance. When riding in a group, stay with the leader, but never pass the leader, and know where the person is behind you. If you're riding in a group, for greater visibility, install a mirror to help keep an eye on the person behind you. Always keep a safe distance and keep your place in line. Snowmobilers have a series of hand signals that are used on the trails to communicate with each other. It's critical to know them and use them correctly. Pointing the left arm straight out indicates a left turn. Left arm out, bent at the elbow, with forearm raised at a 90-degree angle, signals a right turn. Left arm out and forearm angled down to the ground advises to slow down to proceed with caution. Left arm raised straight up indicates you are stopping. And when stopping on the trail, pull over to the extreme right of the trail. Always dismount on the right to avoid traffic coming from behind. Never stop on a curve or a hill. Our beautiful trail systems and riding areas exist because dedicated snowmobilers have worked with landowners to obtain easements for the enjoyment of other snowmobilers. Don't trespass. Stick to the trails and designated riding areas. They are legal, safer, and lead to great destinations. Off-trail riding in non-designated areas could present problems with access privileges from property owners. Trails and riding areas could be closed if you trespass. Fences represent a serious threat, and unseen wires can cause serious accidents. Although an active railroad line is inviting as a trail, it is not a trail and poses great danger for those who ride them. Trails are most common in the central and eastern region of North America. The western and mountain regions offer trails with large expanses of designated riding areas. Be a safe rider. Stick to the trails and safe riding areas. You make snowmobiling safe.
I imagine conditions across all parts of Alaska become a little more challenging, so again, be careful out there. Here's a look at the marine forecast now for southeast to north and northwesterly wind, keeping things a little bit cooler than they have been. 15 to 25 knots across all areas there, 3 to 4 foot seas on the inside, and 9 to about 10 foot seas on the coastal areas there, about 25 knots just west of Gustavus and the northern entrances. By Thursday, you'll look at more of a northerly flow that diminishes somewhat, and look at more of a northeasterly flow into Stevens Passage with a 3 foot sea, 15 knot winds in the Lynn Canal, 3 foot seas there, as well as areas down south with more of a northwesterly flow, and northerlies continue out of Sitka and Craig with 7 to 8 foot seas there. For south central, a north and easterly flow remains relatively light across Prince William Sound. It picks up a little bit more into the western Gulf with winds around 25 to 30 knots and seas running between 12 and 13 feet, 14 feet coming in from the south. As you look at the eastern side of Kodiak Island, easterlies inside Shelikof Strait, and a northeasterly flow that picks up speed a little bit the farther south you go out of the Barren Islands area, around 30 knots with an 8 foot sea. It's only 15 knots so across the northern parts of the Cook Inlet, which have seen a pretty sharp reduction in the ice. Variable winds there on Thursday. You'll see a light flow all the way down the Cook Inlet and sometimes variable west of the Barren Islands and into Shelikof Strait, outside of the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay as well. Westerly flow east of Seward, 15 knots with a 9 foot sea, 6 foot seas outside of Prince William Sound. On the inside, still looking at a northeasterly wind at 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. For the Alaska Peninsula, a south and southeasterly flow crossing over there, 15 to 20 knots or so, with some higher gusts inside Bristol Bay, so watch for that. 12-foot seas there with 7 to 11-foot seas on the Pacific side. As we get into Thursday, southeasterly flow continues inside Bristol Bay at 25 knots. Northeasterlies develop a little bit farther down the peninsula, with southeasterly still coming in around 25 knots with an 11 to 13-foot sea expected in the Pacific. Across the Aleutians, a broad southerly flow across the central and western parts of the chain, 35 to 40 knots out around Kiska. More of a west and northwesterly flow on the Bering Sea side, between 20 and 30 knots, with the strongest winds mainly north of Nikolsky, I should say, and Unalaska, and more of a west and northwesterly flow south of Adak and Atka on the Pacific side, anywhere up to about 35 knots with 13 to 16-foot seas there on the Pacific side. That becomes more of a southerly flow as you get into Thursday, 25 to 30 knots or so, more of a northwesterly flow coming into Nikolsky, and that south and westerly flow broadens up a little bit more west of Adak and Atka. You'll notice the winds diminishing somewhat across the western parts of the chain. Seas, though, still holding around 17 feet. Across the west, you'll notice the ice has moved northward once again and opened up a little bit north and west of Nunivak Island. Looking at south and easterly flow, that's pushing the warm air there, so no wonder that's happened. More of an easterly flow coming across St. Lawrence Island, still showing some ice in that region. We'll have the ice update for you tomorrow. A southeasterly flow across St. Matthew Island waters and a westerly flow across the Pribilofs with an 11-foot sea. Variable flow north of Nunivak Island tomorrow, a 2-foot sea there. And as we get into Thursday, that southeasterly flow out of the Kuskokwim Bay will allow for a 6-foot sea. More of a southerly flow and diminishing there around the Pribilofs with an 8-foot sea, and southeasterlies remain some of the strongest winds we'll see in the region out around St. Matthew with a 9-foot sea there. Across the Arctic coast, light winds across the Chukchi Sea coast, anywhere from 5 to 10 knots or so, mainly from the south and east. The winds pick up a little bit more as you get out toward Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, and Kaktovik, up to 25 knots there north of Kaktovik. The winds switch direction entirely as we get into Thursday, more of a broader westerly flow sweeping across the coast. The light southerlies continue, and that should help to keep things fairly warm there. Anywhere from 5 to 10 knots are expected over the ice by Thursday afternoon. That's your marine forecast. Now let's recap what's going on again around Alaska tonight. A dense fog advisory is posted for the upper Tanana Valley there from places like Northway and Eagle. Expect poor visibility at least through noon tomorrow. And a flash flood watch continues for areas above Valdez and the Keystone Canyon region, obviously, with that pretty hefty avalanche there in the canyon closing off the Richardson Highway. That will continue to be an issue for a while. Tonight's forecast shows several waves of low pressure working in from the west. You'll notice each progressive wave, though, begins to weaken as it approaches the western coast. Got a pretty healthy southerly flow sweeping up the westerly coast, but a lot of moisture is lacking as it moves eastward. So places like southeast, south central, and the interior and the Arctic coast are seeing a lot of drier weather now as we go ahead through the rest of the week. Things remain mild in the west, hopefully not too wild is what I was trying to say. And out across the Gulf of Anadyr, a new wave sets up there, still trying to work its way eastward, but without a whole lot of progress making that moisture move any farther into the interior or south central. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.